that. Good afternoon. We will wait for about a minute or two. We are expecting more people to join in, and I can see people are joining in as I'm talking. So 2 more minutes and we start the webinar. Good afternoon again. I am Rinku Patnaik, the moderator for this webinar, Getting Ready for the Consumer Rebound. Thank you for joining in for this webinar. This pandemic has brought about a change in almost every aspect of our lives. We have seen that in our own personal lives and also when we actually are observing people around us. As we move forward with the countrywide lockdown being opened up in most part of the countries, and we have entered the unlock phase 1.0, this change will be there, I guess, with every consumer across categories. The consumer is likely to be in his or her new avatar as they interact with the different categories. To throw light on the above, in the next 45 minutes, we have Amit Adakar, the country manager, Ipsos India, who will be joined by Neetu Bansal, client officer, and Pallavi Mathurlal, the senior client officer. So the broad areas that we will be covering today would be more in terms of seeing where is India today in terms of consumer sentiments. What are the big consumer behavior changes that we are observing, and as we move forward with the unlock phase, and as marketeers, what is it that one needs to keep in mind for a better connect with consumers with all these changes that's happening with us? Please use the comment box for questions as we move forward in the session, and we will take it up in the end of the session. Over to you, Neetu.
Thank you, Rinku. Good afternoon, everyone. In the next 10 minutes or so, I will give you an overview of the current situation in India and what the overall consumer sentiment is like. The reason why we thought it's important to talk about consumer sentiment before we talk to you about the aspects of behavior change is because behavior is often an outcome of what we are feeling deep within, much like the stock market, where the market plummeting to a new high or crashing down is mostly an outcome of what the consumer is feeling. In the coming slides, you'll also see some data points. These data points have been picked from our global tracker, something we've been running for the last 3 months, tracking the impact that COVID has been having on people, and also from the Global Advisor Survey, which we run. Both these studies are run online, and therefore the data represents the views of the urban and educated masses of India. Let's move on and see what's the current situation in the country. As we all know, the cases continue to rise. The crisis is far from over, and every day our media is reporting a new high. The decline is yet to set in. In fact, there is a debate whether the peak will reach in September or in November. On the other hand, the reality also is while the cases continue to rise, we also see that the country has moved from a phase of lockdown to a phase of unlocking. For the past 3 months, the country was under a stringent lockdown. India was perhaps one of the first countries to put a nationwide lockdown, but soon after we went into lockdown, we saw that the debate evolved to losing lives because of loss of livelihood, and therefore we had to open up. However, the opening up has been staggered. We've opened up in phases because the ground realities in the country do vary substantially across the length and the breadth of the country, and therefore when we talk to people and see which phase of the pandemic we are in, we do see that there is a varied opinion. Broadly speaking, if I was to divide it into three phases, there are a set of people, the first set of people who are saying that as the cases continue to grow, they are preparing for newer restrictions. There is another set of people who feel that they've adjusted to the new normal. Their normal has been defined and they're used to the new routine. And there is another set of people who think that they're going back to their older routines and they are on their path of recovery. It's just delving a bit deeper. Why do people feel this way and why is there a divided opinion? Two reasons perhaps. One, the country is the state level situations in the country do vary. Bangalore is very different from, say, a Mumbai or Delhi, where the situation is worsening, while Bangalore is all green. At the same time, Chennai, the situation was good, but now the state has again gone into lockdown from 19th to 30th June. So things had opened up, but again, the state has gone into a lockdown. At the same time, apart from the state imposed restrictions, the situation also varies on a personal level. Personally, there are people who've now started going back to their place of work. They've started resuming their duties. And there are other people, on the other hand, who've adopted their business models and got used to the new ways of working. They're working from home or they're working, their business models, offline business models have evolved. With this, there is now the debate on what is this reflecting on the financial and the health aspects, the two most debated aspects of the crisis. Let's see what people feel about that. Of course, the financial impact has been more discussed. The financial impact also, as we see, is more big, is much larger than the health impact. When we talk to people and ask them what has their experience been on the financial side as well as on the health side, we saw a larger number of people, up to the tune of 70% people, have experienced a financial impact. Now, this financial impact could have come to them in case of a job loss, in case there have been cases of salary deductions, there have been cases of reduced working hours, or overall for businessmen or self-employed, the overall revenue that they used to do, their daily income has reduced. At the same time, when we look at the health impact, whether people have themselves been diagnosed with COVID or anybody in their near and dear ones is diagnosed with COVID, that personal experience on the health side has been much lower to the tune of 30%. If we look deeper into the financial side, 25% people did say that they've lost their source of income permanently or temporarily. There is no income that's coming in, and an overwhelming majority, 2 in 3, ended up saying that their wages have been cut or their hours have been reduced or their source of income has dwindled. Hence, when we ask them what is the bigger concern, when going forward, what do they think as a concern? The concern whether they'll be able to pay for their family, provide for their family or for themselves. The impact there again is higher. The concern on finances is much higher than the concern on finances. But we've also been tracking these numbers over the last few weeks, and what we saw that slowly with the number of cases rising, the health impact has been slowly growing. So the concern on health and family, whether my family and me will be diagnosed with COVID, that has been moving up a bit. At the same time, with the reopening, the finance concern, whether I'll be able to provide for my family, that's been coming down slowly and slowly. This also is depicted when we ask them about reopening and how optimistic are they that things will come back and the lost jobs will be recovered. Yes, 75% people do feel there is a ray of hope. They are optimistic that the lost jobs will soon be recovered. However, this optimism is not alone. It is accompanied at the same time by anxiousness. The anxiousness of stepping out and resuming my normal duties. While everybody wanted the wheels of economy to start rolling and things to open up so that the commercial activities could take place, when we ask them personally, what about going back to your place of work, there is a lot of anxiousness about going back because they do feel that it is coming along with the risk of catching COVID. As I step out, I'm going to expose myself, and the chances of me getting COVID is much higher. Hence, it's accompanied by anxiousness. This also gets reflected in the emotions that people feel. India is emotionally pulled apart. While there is the optimistic lot, and overall we're an optimistic country, we do feel that we are well prepared, we are informed with knowledge, we are confident that things are going to revive. At the same time, 1 in 2 of us is scared, is frustrated. In fact, there are a few who have very strong negative emotions like defeat and dejection, loneliness. There is 1 in 2 of us who's facing the downward spiral as well. When we looked deeper into this data and tried to correlate it with their personal circumstances, we saw that there is a strong correlation between the personal circumstances that are defining people and the emotions that they are feeling, especially the negative ones. Now, personal circumstances, when I say, what I mean is your financial situation, the household structure that you live in, your life stage, and demographics. These things combined are defining the personal circumstances. And just to detail a bit more on this, we did see some of the expected ones. Somebody who's lost a job will not feel motivated. The level of frustration, the dejection, the level of fear and anxiety is much more higher there. But also there is a strong correlation with life stage. And this is not across only in India. We were running this tracker across 12 countries. And what we saw is there's a strong correlation between the life stage the person is in and the emotion that the person is feeling. A 50-plus-year-old who's financially stable is today much more optimistic. There is a sense of positivity among them that things are going to get better. However, a middle-aged man living in a joint family structure with somebody with old parents or younger kids, he's anxious. He is feeling the sense of anxiety of stepping out and resuming his normal commercial activities, and there is a lot of negative emotions attached there. Somebody who's living in a single household where there's nobody else, there the level of loneliness is much higher. The younger lot who've not been able to do their normal activities, there the level of frustration that has grown with COVID is higher. So there is a very large impact of what personal circumstances are defining me, and therefore the emotions I'm feeling, and something we should keep in mind as we talk to consumers going forward. These circumstances have also manifested themselves in the actions that people are taking over. Somebody who's lonely, staying alone, lost a job, is not feeling motivated. Of course, anxiety is keeping the person making him wake up. He's having sleepless nights. At the same time, others are resorting to stress eating because they're being able to cope up. The chores have increased. Their financials are dwindling. There is anxiety of catching COVID. All of this combined is manifesting itself in either overeating or not being able to keep awake. And you're under exercising. Their focus on their regimens, something that they used to do for people who used to exercise daily, that has gone down in terms of the anxieties they are facing. With all of this, this is the overall situation of the anxieties. And when we keep this in mind, that we as a country at this point in time are at a stage where the crisis is still on the high, the cases continue to grow. At the same time, financially, there have been repercussions, and we ask people what impact has it had on them. We do see that people, even when things return to normal, say that their life will completely change. Many of them ended up saying that many things about what I used to do, how I used to do things, that will undergo a change. My colleague Pallavi will now talk to you about what these changes are going to be like. Yeah, over to you, Pallavi.
Thank you very much, Neetu. Good afternoon, everyone. In this section, we want to bring alive some of the changes that we are seeing from a consumer's perspective. The idea is to draw attention to some of what we feel will be enduring for a while at least. We have done a community with some families to capture these changes. It's been a week-long exercise across the major cities and across life stages. Some of this is also informed by other consumer work that we have been doing, and we've used all of this to bring alive these changes. This is a very apt framework. It's called Change. And this is a framework that we're going to take you through. The different aspects of these frameworks are changing priorities, home being the nerve center, being Atmanirbhar, going digital, and emerging purchase channels. So let's go through the first one. So this is a time where consumers have experienced pain points like never before. And they have either been impressed or dissatisfied with some of the products that they have been using. They have also had more knowledge, more exposure, a better understanding of what all is involved, what is required, based on the work that they have been doing. And as a result, these consumers have also become more discerning, and in future evaluations too, they are likely to review the value price equation of things that they purchase. As a fallout of all the constraints that they have been going through, there has been a natural reprioritization. What do we mean by this? If you look at your own lives, I'm sure for most of us, new daily and weekly schedules have emerged based on doing household chores, cleaning, eating, and so on. And these impact the kind and the depth of consumption of different products and categories. Also, with a constraint on time and more people to handle at home, and the financial fears and the health anxieties that Neetu just spoke about, trade-offs have been made. What is more important to me needs to be done now. What can be done later can be pushed. If immunity is important, as we hear so many of them say, then the attempt is made across, from amla juice in the morning to having kara to having vitamins and minerals and supplements, and also paying attention on food ingredients. So these trade-offs have actually happened between categories and within categories. Some of the expenses have been postponed, like big ticket items, and some have had to be made now, and some have had to be curtailed. Laptops, Wi-Fi connections have been used to their limits, and the wish lists have been developed for a vacuum cleaner, a vegetable chopper, a mixer grinder, a spin mop, and even a bigger fridge. Even in our Essentials Global Tracker, we see that the importance of various categories and brands has shifted during the period of lockdown for urban consumers. Right from the days of panic buying and hoarding to looking for ways to reduce costs, especially when salary cuts or job losses or businesses closing temporarily has been the situation. This change in priorities gives us an insight into what is inherently important to your consumers, that because in a time of constraints, the important is what bubbles to the top. So while priorities have changed for consumers, what has also happened is that everyone has been operating from home all this time. This brings us to the second one. Our homes have found a new meaning. A good part of our lives earlier used to be outside of home. We now have had to learn how to live with all the family members at home. Home has been the only safe place where you can be with your family and keep them safe too. So the whole world has contracted to home. And here also, there is a steep learning curve for all members of the family, minus the help that they are used to. So what do we mean by the nerve center? Well, home is the new office, new school, new hobby class, new gym, new party place, new restaurant. We have learned to be comfortable and formal. We have learned to have entertainment and family time at home. We've learned to party and relax at home. And this has required a level of adaptation because we are sharing the same space with all the other family members. There has been allocation of space, gadgets, furniture as we perform our activities. These activities could be alone or with everyone together. For example, those who needed to establish, a work from home schedule needed a table and a setup of a workplace. While when you exercise, you need a phone or a laptop and the space for a mat, and so on. Partying is when people are getting dressed up and enjoying their drinks and food and cake, etc., with others. While doing all of this from our constrained spaces, the one positive thing to emerge is an equalizing of gender roles. Men and women both are involved in housework and activities. Even kids and elders in the family are contributing more and more to chores and activities and decision making as well. For example, someone likes washing dishes with a dishwash bar and someone else wants liquid. Do we want to eat burgers today or noodles? Which is the cooking oil or milk that suits the whole family? We have also seen the uglier side of this confinement in the shape of domestic abuse. So, well, home has become the command center where everything happens, sensitivities and moods are handled, and all roles, work, etc., has to be handled too. This needs to be understood deeper. What all has been unlocked, how this influences the consumer's interactions with different categories and in different ways. We now have new occasions, new needs to explore and fulfill. The power to do everything at home has also made us focus on our capabilities so we can be more Atmanirbhar. This is more than just a hashtag or what our Prime Minister spoke about. It's real. Having handled utter chaos and disbelief right in the beginning, to complaining, to acclimatizing, many people have been forced to focus on building an endurance during the lockdown, and people are more self-reliant. So basically, this has been a move from a shared economy to now being on my own. If people have had to do everything on their own, they needed to set up their capabilities, their own capabilities, and at home. So, for example, video tutorials have helped consumers tackle many of the tasks and actions that they haven't tried before, whether it's recipes, and even men have been cooking a lot, removing stains, for example, cutting hair, threading, working on laptops, and getting comfortable with everything digital for the elderly, even. Once people have overcome the disruption and done all this, it is likely that they will continue for some time. These are all also capabilities and skills that have been added so people can save monies. You can do without outside help a bit now. Right now, the motivation is strong since nobody knows when and if things will be purely back to normal. But nobody wants to face the same level of disruption and chaos again. The DIY, do it yourself, for so long also means that consumers have learned to do things in their own way. Whether it's cooking, cleaning, schedules, what has worked will be difficult to let go immediately. One of the consumers said that when her maid comes back, she's going to have a tough time, the maid, that is, due to increased expectations and demands from her. And you need to dive deeper into understanding what has really clicked and look for how we can make that last. So now that the consumers have to be Atmanirbhar and they have to do everything on their own from their home, digital is the way to go. Consumers have learned to lean on digital more and more. For every need, every query, entertainment, work requirements, schooling, hobbies, and what have you. Digital is not new to us, but what has happened is that all age groups are using it and the usage is much deeper than before. What have you not done on the digital medium during this time? Work from home, of course, but also utilizing time to do more. We spoke to people who have done online courses and have built their professional capabilities. This is also for building their own credentials in case the job market becomes tougher. Personal growth. When you're confined, you still need to do things that are involving, enjoyable. You need to have time well spent. And people are taking up new hobbies and skills. Exercising, cooking, learning crochet, cutting hair, making indoor gardens, Python courses, and whatnot. This forced digitization has exposed everyone to the advantages of being connected, of say paying online or learning something. The physical face-to-face has slightly less relevance now across many aspects. Let's see how this pans out. Like I said, digital usage is not new. What has happened is that it cuts across life stages, even in rural, and consumers are using it for more and more aspects of their life now. So more width and depth. So now that the consumers are confined to home, using digital and not stepping out, they want all their products to be delivered right to their doorsteps. And this is where we notice a redefining of the distribution mechanism and emergence of new channels of purchase. The traditional trade has always been big in India, and our kiranas and local shops have stood by us by delivering our essential products to us every day. But there have been new channels which could revolutionize how goods are purchased. Earlier, the omni-channel was between offline and e-commerce players, and the bigger e-commerce players were grabbing the shares of the consumers. However, now we have seen the emergence of small players. These are local players who are also online and can also deliver to your doorstep with digital payments. Local and hyperlocal models have made it work with Zomato's, Dunzo, and Swiggy's delivering groceries, for example. Direct-to-home efforts through societies, RWAs, direct from the farm, or even large retailers setting up their shops or bringing their trucks within condos. All this has happened on its own, in an effort to help the farmers, in an effort to keep the businesses going, and to provide consumers what they need, products almost at their doorstep to avoid stepping out and stay protected. More importantly, it also drives efficiencies in many cases and reduces costs. Who would have thought RWAs can be an important distribution channel? While we are talking of disruption and the behaviors and indeed some of the mechanisms that have been newly adapted, I would urge you all to look at the family that's coping with all of this and the structure of the family. The change we have spoken about is not homogeneous. Think of where the disruption has happened more or less. Consider the family size and its structure. What we found is that the joint family with more people to share the responsibilities have been least affected. Individual members are less disrupted. Main meals, for example, have been more or less the same. Routines have only marginally changed. Compare that to a nuclear family with young kids. Young kids need additional looking after. They can't help with chores, and the families have been feeling very stretched without any help. Similarly, compare families where only a single parent is working versus both parents working. More disruption is directly proportional to more exposure and more learnings and hence more adaptation. So does this warrant a change in the demographics we capture? Just the chief wage earner CWE details won't suffice if this kind of situation persists and if some of these key behaviors settle into a new normal. Size, structure, age of children becomes important. More people in the family will be contributing to decisions made on what is bought and where the money is spent. So some food for thought for you all here. What we will do now is we have compiled a lot of what we just spoke about through consumer verbatims and pictures directly from consumers to bring this alive for you. So I would request that you go through this video and see what we were talking about.
Lockdown time, I had to substitute a lot of brands that I usually use and make do with whatever was available off the shelf. But since I was home, it was not such a big thing. Used my time very effectively and I had a very good skin and hair care regime. I applied oil very regularly and experimented a lot with face pack. Experiment a lot. So I'm a Bihari. Okay, I'm a Bihari, and in spite of being Bihari, I never made litti chokha at my home, which I'm running for last 13-14 years. So this time, for the first time, I made that also. Of course, for that, I had to call my mom, or I've seen lots of YouTube videos.
lot of things which we had never even imagined to be involved in as a family. We have been like board games like Ludo, Scrabble, and like I don't remember when I last played Ludo, which was like I think 20 years back. We've realized we've enjoyed it and probably will continue even after lockdown. Netflix has been such a breather in these times. Keeps me away from all the bad news that I keep hearing outside about people falling ill and this and that.
I hope you all got a good glimpse of the changes that we have been talking about and enjoyed hearing it directly from your consumers. I hand over to Amit now, and he will talk to you about the opportunities these behaviors bring to us.
Thank you, Pallavi, and thank you for introducing everybody to the change that we are observing in the last 2 or 3 months. Now, I think, one of the implications of this change is to ask ourselves, what do we do with it? So what? Yeah, we see that there's a fair amount of change happening around us over the last 2 or 3 months. What do we do with it? Now, before I sort of, move ahead and tackle this very philosophical question, I would like everybody just to pause for a moment and reflect on what is our task. I think all of us on the call, we are practicing researchers, we are practicing marketing professionals, and practicing insights professionals. And I think one of the holy grails of our jobs is to understand our consumers, understand their attitudes, understand their lifestyle, and think about what kind of marketing interventions can possibly influence their future behavior. So the classical marketing construct is you work on communication, you come back with different marketing interventions, leveraging on the prevailing attitudes and the mindset, and hopefully you'll be able to influence consumers' behavior in future. Now, contrast this with what COVID has brought to us. COVID, for the last 10 weeks, the entire lockdown that we saw, especially in India, where 1.3 billion people were under the world's largest and perhaps the most harshest kind of lockdown. COVID experiences in the last 2.5 months is actually, in a way, in a very academic way, the world's largest behavioral science experiment, where people have been forced to do things which otherwise they wouldn't have done, which is stay cooped up at home. And Pallavi did touch upon the role of family in the entire, change, where the kind of activities or things that you wouldn't have done with your family, now you're forced to do because you couldn't go out. So the interesting element for me as a research and a market research professional is it has given us an insight into how behavior can actually, for once, be the leading indicator. We always hope that attitudes will change and over time, because of that, behavior will change. But here we had behavior of close to 1.3 billion people changed very artificially with complete ruthlessness over the period of 2.5 months. So in that context, it's very critical to ask ourselves, so what? Yes, there is change, and Pallavi talked about some of the manifestations, and almost all the manifestations are rooted in behavior, right? Whether it's a question of going digital, whether it's a question of making home your nerve center, your war center, your command room, everything happens at home. All these are behavioral changes. So yes, we've seen changes. So what? So I think the question you might want to ask yourself is, are these change behaviors here to stay? We've seen these behaviors in a pressure test situation. During the lockdown, we couldn't do much. We were sitting at home and we had to adopt and change and make these course corrections to our behavior. But now that, Unlock 1.0 has started and we have started stepping out, and that process will now pick up pace, hopefully in July and August. These behaviors that we saw in the last 3 months, are they here to stay? Now, for me, actually, this is not the right question to ask. For me, the right question to ask is if we can make these behaviors count and stick. Now let me explain. If you look at the basic tenets of behavior therapy or the basic tenets of change management, what we see is that when people start doing something which is different than what they're used to. So let's say, during the lockdown, they started sort of showing some signs of the change that we talked about, and which was not usual before the lockdown. What happens after the lockdown starts getting lifted? Now, there are two possibilities. People can go back to their earlier ways. And some of the data that Neetu shared in the beginning clearly showed that, yes, there's anxiety, there is a concern, but at the same time, people feel positive. They feel that, yes, jobs will come back and life will return to normal at some stage. So you'll find two kinds of opinions. That people will say, yes, things will slowly go back, but they'll pretty much go back to what they were. And obviously, a proportion of people will say, no, we have to move on. Life won't be the same ever. My point is that during the lockdown, the behaviors were forced behaviors. In future, as marketeers, as researchers, we can look at these behaviors as not just academic constructs, but actually something that we can base our marketing interventions on. And the two questions in that context is, can we make these behaviors count? Now, what do you mean by count? For me, making a behavior count is to actually build on it and make a business case out of it and go and launch something, have a marketing communication, have a product innovation strategy, so that we are not only leveraging, but actually making that behavior into, something which is a big business opportunity. So that's about making the behavior count. And what is making them stick? Now, as I said, the lockdown behaviors were sort of not really normal. Imagine somebody who's been behaving in a particular way for 30 years, 40 hours, 40 years or 50 years, and suddenly for 2 months you change your behavior. There's a very high chance that things will start going back to the earlier normal. But if you want to really make the behaviors count and make them into a big business potential, a business opportunity, you also need to make them stick. So you need to sort of somehow ride on the fact that people will now start changing some of the behaviors to the new normal. So for me, as researchers and as marketing professionals, our task is to ask ourselves, can these behaviors, can we make them count, and can we make them stick? Now, our point of view is there are multiple ways, there are multiple marketing interventions that one can use to make these behaviors count as well as stick. Let me just broadly touch upon some of them. Now, obviously, there's a list of 7 items that you see on the slide. It doesn't mean that there are only 7 things one can do. There can be many more. But based on the change that we have observed and based on the sort of IP that we have within Ipsos, we believe that these 7 areas could be good areas to look at as marketing interventions to make these behaviors stick and count. So let me talk about product innovation. That's a bit of a obvious one. Even during the lockdown, there were a fair amount of innovation around the basic hygiene and sanitation. And even now, sanitization solutions, different ways of making sure that the food you consume, the groceries that you order, they are sort of sanitized and cleaned up. So that's a very obvious kind of innovation, which immediately leverages the challenge around the virus. But as the change framework showed, some of these behaviors will continue and can continue if you are able to leverage in terms of product. So this is just one example of one intervention of how we can make the behaviors stick and count. The second one, and this is actually in fact very critical from the perspective of making behaviors stick, is to start establishing new rituals. Because again, the tenets of behavioral science say that the best way to change a behavior is to build strong rituals around what we want to change. And this is the ideal opportunity. You had the world's largest behavioral science experiment, and this is a good chance for marketeers to start setting or establishing new rituals. The third could be virtualizing experiences, because I think the most famous sort of thing about the COVID and the lockdown, apart from the virus itself, is the concept of social distancing. And I think what used to be physical and a physical experience is not going to be the same for some time to come, which means that there's an opportunity to virtualize a lot of physical experiences that people may not be able to or may not be keen to experience in future. So I think virtualizing experiences could be another marketing intervention. One could start looking at delivery as a differentiator. And I think the classical marketing wisdom says that when you deliver the product, let's say in the traditional physical distribution scenario to the shop, or if it's e-commerce, then to your doorstep, delivery sort of ends there. And I think this is a bit of a wake-up call for physical distribution, because people will be cagey about walking into shops, maintaining distances. And to that extent, how can retail and how can marketers use delivery as a differentiator, as not something which is just a pure enabler or a pipeline to get products to the last mile. And I think the definition of last mile could also change from the shop to your house to your RWA and so on and so forth. And I think Pallavi talked about some great examples when she introduced us to the change framework. The next bucket is obviously the area of responsible communication. And even now, a lot of brands, a lot of marketeers have sort of started talking about how they are careful and how they are particular about the way their products and services are being delivered while keeping the guidelines in mind. And I think I see a big sort of opportunity for marketeers to look at communication, especially responsible communication, to create a clutter breaking and convincing message. Obviously, activations will get impacted to an extent because the physical dimension is getting compromised post COVID. So activations will especially invoke trust. So as a consumer, I feel comfortable that when I interact with the brand, when I interact with your promo, I actually feel safe. I feel comfortable. I think so. Trust will play a big role in physical activations. And finally, there's an element of servicizing products. So a lot of products could be sort of converted or positioned as services to overcome the challenges posed by COVID. Now, I just have a few examples I want to touch upon. And the 7 principles are to that extent quite generic. They are not really specific to a particular category. And if I just sort of throw in some categories in the mix, you have beauty, retail, food and home, hygiene. Let me just talk about some random examples. So if I look at product innovation in the context of beauty, I think one of the areas which could see possibly a big impetus is beauty tech. And because the inability of people to walk into salons for some time, let's say, or the propensity of people to do a DIY beauty at home because they have been sort of having haircuts and doing different beauty regimens at home, could actually give rise to a DIY beauty or a beauty tech kind of a segment. So that could be one area of possible beauty innovation. One of the areas which doesn't usually get talked about, but it has an implication for a third of India's population at least, is the edutech area. And I think one area which has got disrupted quite a bit and which is likely to get disrupted in future is the education area. And edutech, classically, you have the old world physical universities or colleges or schools, and then you have the MOOCs, which sit at the other extreme. And now with COVID, and with, let's say, home being the nerve center, the entire face of education could perhaps change, driven by edutech, where there could be a confluence between what a classical university will teach, a classical college will teach, and what a MOOC can offer. So I think this is one area waiting to be disrupted going ahead in future. Even automotive could sort of leverage a lot in terms of product innovation. Things like air conditioners, which can provide incremental germ kill in a car, or special materials used so that they are, let's say, a bit more resistant to any kind of infestation. I think these are the kind of innovations which will take a lot of takers. So I think product innovation is one area which has implications across various kinds of categories. If I look at rituals, I think some other marketers have already launched products like products which help you in washing the produce like vegetables before you use them. So I think we already started seeing some innovations. I'm not really an expert when it comes to facial beauty care, but there could be a potential to have a cleansing, toning, moisturizing equivalent, which is there for face care, for hand care, because I think hand care is a new buzzword in town with frequent messages about using the sanitizers and wash your hands for 20 seconds and all of that. There could be a SWM, so let's say sanitizing, washing, moisturizing routine for hand care. So that could be one way of establishing new rituals around all the guidelines which have been issued for the future. Um, it could be rituals like having a family cookout day or a men's cooking weekend or something like that, where in addition to the plethora of days that we already have in our country, we can have specific days to leverage on some of the COVID-related behaviors that we've seen in the change framework. I talked about virtualizing experiences. There's a lot of potential in automotive to venture into virtual showrooms, because people might feel uncomfortable watching into showrooms, and at your home you can browse through a virtual showroom. Now we have the ready AR and VR kind of technology in the hardware which is accessible, and I think that could be a good way for automotive companies to virtualize the entire car buying experience. Fitness is the other area where you can pretty much virtualize, a lot of experiences in the comfort of your home. Shopping, and I think, when you think about shopping or purchase, we think about traditional retail and we think about e-commerce. Maybe there's a potential for the retail sector to get into virtual shopping, leveraging AR and VR. Now, a virtual shop, looks exactly like a shop, doesn't look like an e-commerce website, but it allows people to physically, not physically, but virtually touch and feel the product, walk through the aisles, and actually, make your shopping experience maybe not as good as the physical shopping, but at least as contact-free as a physical shopping experience will never be. So I think virtualizing experience could be a good window. Servicizing products could be a good area where you might have things like, like for example, you have cases where you can't really, you don't have time to go through your house cleaning and jhadu pocha kind of a routine in future. And you can actually see an emergence of servicizing some of these cleaning products, washing products, through a subscription-based model. That could be a good way of servicizing products. On the other hand, there could be some opportunities for productizing a service also. A lot of us might feel uncomfortable walking into a restaurant because of, social distancing and all that. And actually the restaurants, and especially the branded restaurants, can bring home recipe boxes from for different kinds of cuisines. Maybe some collateral from the chef who's giving some tips, and they could be ready to eat or ready to cook kind of restaurant in a box, kind of an innovation, which is a good example of productizing a service. So servicizing a product and productizing a service could be good opportunities. I already talked about how delivery can be a differentiator. And Pallavi did talk about the increasing role of RWAs, or the housing societies, in deciding what comes in and what goes out. And there could be cases where brands could tie up with RWAs and housing societies for in society shop or in society service. In fact, just a couple of days ago, the RWA where I stay, they've started discussing with a couple of salon service providers to sort of set up a salon in our society, let's say 2 hours every day once the government gives a go ahead, so that people don't have to step out and visit different salons, and you actually have a case of salon coming into the RWA. And obviously you have a questions of services delivered at home, but this is a good example of how we can make the RWA or the housing society as your last mile, right? So I've talked about multiple examples, and some of these marketing interventions are equally applicable across categories. And I think one area which is not usually talked about, and that's missing on this chart, is the entire area of mental well-being, because we always focus on the physical aspects of an ailment like that. Yes, people will fall sick and they'll have fever and they'll have whatever. But I think one of the biggest insight is that being closeted at home with your family, without a lot of other sort of avenues to go and spend your time, like go to the mall, drive out, take vacations. There could be inarguably a lot of mental sort of agony and stress that people must be undergoing. And I think DIY mental well-being, whether it's a service model, a product model, or a gamification or an app model, there are multiple opportunities around mental well-being, which typically is not the category which which comes top of mind. Like that. So I think our point of view is that with the understanding of the change that we talked about some time back, to leverage on the change, we can actually do something. And to that extent, we can say, yes, we can make them count. Now, the next question is that, yes, making them count to using any of these 6 or 7 interventions will help in converting these behaviors into tangible, scalable opportunities. But the critical area is to make them stick. And I think one of the things that I want to put on the table is that Ipsos has done a fair amount of work in the area of behavior change. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we ran a behavior change webinar for some of the clients. And in case you were not able to attend, you could ask for the recording or the presentation. But we have a fairly well evolved practitioner knowledge and our own MAPS framework to work with clients and to guide them about how to make behavior change more enduring and endearing. So there's a lot of work that we have done, and we'll be more than happy to share the work with you. So I think the final message I have is that, yes, if you look at the change framework, there's a lot we can do, and there's a lot we can do to make these changes count and stick. So I think this is what pretty much I had to talk about. So this is just to leave you with this chart. It says that yes, last 2.5 months we've seen the world's largest behavioral science experiment, and we do see a lot of change, both literally as well as figuratively. And I think it's for us as research and insights and marketing professionals to sort of take the mantle and say, yes, this change is interesting. And with Ipsos working with you as partners, we can make this change count as well as stick. So thank you very much. And Rinku, back to you.
Thank you, Amit. That was an interesting session, and I love the example of CTM to SWM ritual that you talked of. We have some time now. I can see a lot of questions that is there that the audience has actually put. So Amit, the first question is to you. In terms of these changes that you've talked of, the big consumer changes, and you've said that marketers need to adapt. As MR partners, you also interact with the same consumer. So what are the changes and adaptations do you see in the way that you are doing market research now? Amit, can you hear me?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. Yeah, I can hear you now. So I was just saying that, Rinku, you gave me the toughest question to answer. But anyway, I think just the way we look at some of this change impacting our consumers and customers. Yes, this change has impacted us also as an agency and as a insights partner to all of our clients. I can talk about 2 or 3 examples, to draw on the change. So I think one of the things that Pallavi talked about as a part of the change is obviously the go digital part, the G in change. So obviously for us as an industry, this has become a big focus. As you know, the research industry in India is primarily face-to-face, so which means that we need to rely on people, interviewers going and meeting people at their houses to conduct interviews and capture insights. And during the lockdown, that ability pretty much went to zero. And even going ahead, we don't see that ability coming back to its full capacity anytime soon. So we have been pushing a lot of online research, and we have worked with, I think, almost all of our clients trying to push online research. To that extent, this was a jolt which came from the sky. But as an industry, and Ipsos obviously as one of the large agencies, has made that transition quite well. And I think there are a lot of advantages that I can talk about, but again, time won't last. But yes, Ipsos going digital is a go way of adopting the go digital philosophy. In fact, Pallavi talked about the nerve center, home being the nerve center, and we because our interviewers couldn't do fieldwork visiting other people's home, we employed a lot of telephonic methodologies where interviewers could actually sit in their own home and do interviews using the same processes, same protocols. So telephonic was the other way of using sort of the absence of face-to-face contact towards our advantages. And I think next 1 or 2 months we'll be announcing some more things, but maybe this is not the right time. So yes, we have aggressively adopted some of the changes, and hopefully we'll see the sort of results in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Neetu, there are a couple of questions on the COVID tracker. I'm combining the question. One is in terms of what is the profile of the COVID waves that in terms of the people that we went to for the tracker, and the second question is the profile of the COVID waves that you talked of and the video that we showed and the community that we had and when Pallavi talked of, are they similar kind of people?
Okay, I'll take the first one first. The COVID tracker that we went to was across India, people who are online. We used our own panels, and what it does represent is the urban educated masses. I would say the SECA B1. B1 would be on the lower side. At the same time, when it comes to age group, it would be anywhere 18 to 60 years. We went broad because we wanted the consumer sentiment to be across consumers, across life stages. Yeah.
Okay, so more or less similar for both in terms of the video and the tracker.
Yes, the videos were also belonging to the SECA A1 kind of people. Yes, those were a part of our community because we were interacting with them also using online methods, talking to them. The community was online, and they were to come on the platform and talk to us on a regular basis. So they had to be active with online methods.
Okay, thank you. Pallavi, there's a question for you in terms of health and wellness was always growing. It was already in a path trajectory which was upward. However, due to pandemic, one could see certain propelling this particular future. But anything in particular, subcategories in F&B that you think that would benefit from this health and wellness trend?
That's an interesting question. See, what consumers are talking about, they are trying to look at health and wellness and immunity from every possible angle. So there are certain ingredients and certain buzzwords that have cropped up, and we have got mentions of tulsi, of say giloy, of zinc, of old remedies like chavanprash. This is what people know, and this is what they've been hearing, and this is what they've been adding on to their current diet. Apart from other, measures like cooking fresh food and things like that. So really, it's up to us if, as marketeers, we can tap into this. Say, with the mention of an ingredient that consumers already believe to help, believe that it helps in building immunity, then it is really upon us, because right now they are open, they are looking for reassurance, they're looking for the best ways and every possible way in which they can build their immunity. I hope I managed to answer.
So there's a second question which is on makeup and clothes, saying that, in terms of the community that you guys worked on, was there any sense of revenge buying, especially in terms of, for premium products, for makeup or any accessories or clothing?
Well, yes, the consumers do talk about it because there are clearly they're missing it. They're missing their favorite brands. If they've been premium brands and they have not been available because of the lockdown and only, your regular kirana is working and so on, they have been talking about it. At the same time, they are a little cagey about going out shopping very quickly, immediately into the lockdown. So, I mean, in a sense, yes, they are waiting to wear their dresses and their fashion clothes and, waiting to party, waiting to meet people because they're missing it. They're waiting for their cosmetics and their personal care, high-end products. And it is likely we will sample some bit of the revenge buying that we know other countries like China had experienced.
Okay. So, in the interest of time, we'll just take in one last question, but there were many more actually, which what we will do is we will respond to all of you. There's one last question for Amit. Any learning on how responses would vary between online and teleservices, telephonic survey, and offline surveys? Amit, I can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Yeah. So I was saying, given the time constraints, obviously, I can't do justice to this question. We have a research on this topic. So Rinku, as a part of, whatever we're going to send back to all the people on the call, we can share a copy of the research on the research. But, in a very concise way, yes, there are some differences, salient differences. But, you can't really say that the differences are same or similar across, various kinds of scenarios. For example, there are complications like the length of an interview. And obviously, in an online questionnaire, the more the length, more is the feasibility of doing the interview. With a face-to-face, you can go for a slightly longer interview. So I think there are changes that we observe, but that is based on, let's say, what kind of questioning, what is the incident rate, what kind of profile we are dealing with, what is the length of the interview. And there's a very detailed research on research that we have, and we will share that with everybody.
Thanks, Amit. We have a lot more questions, but I'm cognizant of the time, and we are already 2 minutes over 4 o'clock. So what we'll do is we will end the session here. But for each of the questions that you have put down in the mailbox, we will respond to them, and we will also share the recording of this webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and thanks Amit and Pallavi and Neetu for sharing this engaging session with all of us. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.